Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to our second meeting. Of course, these meetings are meant to supplement the physical classes that we had. And we continue with our subject that we did not conclude. And that was the subject of the nature of knowing. So we are dealing with the issue of knowledge. And these are lectures we are having in the philosophy of science. So philosophy of science, and more specifically for our students on the energy economics program. If you recall, last week we went through a number of things. I gave you an outline that we are supposed to follow and conclude. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, it was not really possible for us to cover everything. But we covered at least, I gave you an introduction. I did talk about knowledge. What is knowledge? Then we moved on to the nature of reality. And we did really describe a number of perspectives on reality, the social construction, and of course we also had the positivistic kind of thinking, but linking it to ontology, epistemology, axiology, and so forth. And I think that's where we stopped. Now, ladies and gentlemen, today I intend to start from where we stopped last week and go into the nature of reality, because we need to understand what reality is. Then we shall go to concepts. Concepts are very important because they are building blocks of understanding. And then from there, we'll look at the nature of concepts. We shall look at concepts, constructs, and variables. I remember there's an assignment I gave you last time. I hope you've done that. And the objective for the assignment was to try and bring all these perspectives together. Anyway, we shall look at those concepts, the building blocks of understanding, and then we shall also look at conceptual systems, the basis for deeper understanding. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this second lecture. And I hope you have enjoyed this vacation and you had a very nice time. We just wish you the best. And of course, now you are studying this course, Philosophy of Science, in a relaxed mood. I'm sure you must be enjoying. And you can always study from anywhere. And knowledge is not limited to the four walls of a class. There are so many ways of picking this information. So we are now going into this aspect of reality, the nature of reality. And I want to begin by presenting to you how reality can actually be an illusion and how reality is experienced. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you last time before we broke off that I'll start with the works of Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein made a very powerful statement that we need to understand in our perspective, because at the end of the day, we'll be talking about philosophy of science in economics. And we are going to discuss those concepts one by one, right? The basic foundation of economics. And we are going to interrogate this concept of economics and try to understand it very well. So, but let's begin with the works of Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein simply said, reality is simply an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. Now, by an illusion, Einstein means it has the appearance of being real. You know, reality is a very complex thing. You remember I gave you an example in our previous meeting. I gave you an exercise of drawing two parallel lines. I hope you still remember that. You did that, but you had multiple interpretations, right? So, and you see, unless somebody tells you we are talking about a number, right? Then you say, hey, it's a Roman numeral 2. The other one will say, no, it is really an Arabic number 2, that kind of thing. Right, but for the other fellow who is, again, preoccupied with the other things, he will say a different thing altogether. He will say, I'm seeing two roads, I'm seeing a road somewhere. So I think it all depends on the perspectives and the lenses that you put on in trying to examine these concepts. So reality can be an illusion, and it has the appearance of being real, and this illusion can be persistent, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why in research you must be very careful. Actually, researchers are humble people. So you learn to respect the views of other people and even interrogate the views of those scholars, right? So by illusion, Einstein means it has the appearance of being real. So time and space are illusions. The ley lines seemingly to meet in the distance, right, can also be an illusion, you know that very well. All reality is perceptual. I can give you another example to bring this aspect to a real understanding of what we want to pick from this. Let me just give you an example. You are walking on a sunny day on a road, moving from point A to point B. It is really too hot, right, and very sunny. All of a sudden in front of you, you actually see something that looks like water. If you are very thirsty, you may move very fast. You want to go and drink that water because you are thirsty. You think that there's actually a lake or a pond or a river or a pool of water in front of you on a road, when in the actual sense, that is a mirage. So in that sense, a mirage is an illusion, right? It has a sense of appearing to be so real, but unfortunately, it is not the real thing. And therefore, as researchers, we need to be very careful, right? We go through the scientific, rigorous process of understanding that reality. So that's why we are discussing reality, so that tomorrow, if you are challenged by the scholars in this discipline or area, you should not really wake up and then start lamenting and cursing everybody, and you say, well, people don't understand me, right? They do not, maybe they don't like me. First of all, they don't have to understand you, and two, they don't have to like you, right? If it is scholarship, your work must be accepted by the scholarly audience. Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, since we've looked at reality, right, as an illusion, then now we can look at how reality is experienced. How do we experience reality? And here we shall be looking at the following aspects. Reality appears to be complex. Reality appears dynamic. Reality appears unique. Reality appears mostly obscure. Don't forget, those are the aspects that we're going to look at. Reality appears complex. Reality appears dynamic. That reality appears unique. And that reality appears most obscure, ladies and gentlemen. So why don't we start with reality that appears to be complex, right? So we are going to ask ourselves a question, assuming for a moment that reality exists, right? And you can say, well, that is reality. Reality because I can see this. I can see a body of water. I can see an organization called A and is functioning, right? Assuming for the moment that reality exists, how is it experienced by the individual? We experience the world around us, ladies and gentlemen, as a complex, dynamic flow of unique and repeatable phenomenon and events. And you need to know that very well. Let me just give you an example. If yesterday it rained, right? You say, yes, it rains. Today it may rain, but I'll tell you the pattern of the rain you had yesterday will not be exactly the same as the pattern of rain you have today. It's very hard. You cannot say this drop came in this direction and the other one came in from the other direction. And even today, it will be exactly the same. And those are the challenges you will face as researchers. You're going to generalize your findings. right? And then you say, well, we see that A influences B, therefore government must do A. But who tells you that the same pattern of behaviors will exist tomorrow? That is a very big question that we must try to answer, ladies and gentlemen. So we experience the world around us as a complex, dynamic flow of unique and unrepeatable phenomenon and events. So most of these phenomena and events are not directly observable, ladies and gentlemen. So attempting to understand our world can be a difficult process. Very difficult. Difficult. So you try to observe, but not very. Let me just give you an example. And right now we are in the lecture. We are having a lecture. So let's just think for a moment that this lecture hall is filled with students. So if I give you a task to describe in precise detail the sizes, the shapes, colors of clothing, the objects that you see in this lecture hall, the relationships among those aspects that you see, the psychological components of what we see in the lecture hall, the sociological components of that lecture hall, at one instant in time, I can assure you it will take you months, it will take you years, it will take you perhaps your lifetime to describe what you see. So that is how complex reality is. And we can see here that the issue of complexity is an important aspect, ladies and gentlemen. So reality can be very complex. But as researchers, we try to model. And that's why we develop conceptual systems. And we develop theories can actually mirror what we see out there in reality. So let me take you to the second aspect. Reality appears dynamic, ladies and gentlemen. From the tiniest particles that constitute physical matter to the largest galaxies, things are always in motion, ladies and gentlemen. Things are always in motion. Therefore, reality is dynamic. And as scholars, we need to understand that very well so that we provide we provide findings that will guide decision-making and policy-making, but not forgetting the fact that reality is dynamic. Right. Let me just give you an example. Right. The cells of living organisms are always growing or decaying. And the impulses in the neuronal systems are always at work. So I know you may want to study, right, living organisms if you're a scientist and a natural scientist. You want to understand the world out there, right? That's okay. But you see, something that you left behind yesterday will not exist in the same state today. No. The earth, right, keeps on creating a number of things that do interfere with the reality out there, right? And that's why we are saying that systems are always changing, right? So we are saying reality appears dynamic. Things never stay the same. Things are never constant. The world at any given instant is different from the world at the very next instant, ladies and gentlemen. Things are always in motion. People form new relationships from time to time, and hence a different reality emerges. Today you are my friend, tomorrow you may actually be my enemy, right? So if you are studying patterns and networks, right, the results you get today may not actually reflect tomorrow or the future. So we need to be very careful here. So we can look at the third aspect. Reality appears unique, ladies and gentlemen. Reality is unique because of this dynamic quality that I've just described a few seconds ago. The universe at any given instant and everything in it, ladies and gentlemen, is never the same as the universe at any other instant, either previous or subsequent. For example, the water that flows at one particular instant or during any given day down the river Nile, the raindrops that fall on a particular evening in Kampala, etc., are unique and can never be repeated precisely. And that's why I say the reality is unique. The uniqueness, the element of uniqueness is quite important for us to understand. No two people are precisely identical. That is quite hard. You'll never find these individuals. I mean, even what we call identical twins, they are not really very identical, right? So all these things change, right? They are never the same. Even a rock that you left somewhere, that you left lying somewhere yesterday on the ground is unique. Right, and because of the forces that take place on that rock, like the denudational processes, right, the withering processes, it means that the way you left it yesterday is not the way it is today because of the forces that have acted on that rock, and the rock has changed form, shape, right? And therefore, for you who is studying those aspects of rocks, you need to be very, very careful. So in theory, no two rocks are identical in terms of all their distinguishing characteristics, and we just have to understand that very well. Let me take you to another element of reality. Reality appears mostly obscure. So there is that obscurity in reality, ladies and gentlemen. Probably the major share of reality remains hidden from direct detection by any of our senses, right? So I know we try to research as researchers, try to understand reality, but some of the things and most of the things remain obscure. Now, to be sure, right, that what we are doing is correct, scientific instruments are being developed that enable us to probe more deeply into space, see every tinier particles of matter, but the vast majority of nature's secrets still remains mysteriously hidden from the direct view. So you do not see those things. Secrets cannot be seen, for example. The secrets cannot be heard. Secrets cannot be tested, right? You cannot smell, you cannot touch these secrets. Therefore, it means that you must develop tools, right, or methods that will enable you to discover these aspects, ladies and gentlemen. Now, whereas many aspects of human phenomena are openly visible, for example, we can see a person walking, we can see a person eating a sandwich or purchasing a newspaper, a vast number of others are not, ladies and gentlemen. A person's psyche, right, is a person's psyche. The inner thoughts of an individual are inner thoughts and feelings, right? They guide an individual's behavior, but they remain obscure to us, right? We cannot, I mean, that's why when we develop instruments, we attempt to ask these fellows to report about certain things, but the fellows can also tell you lies. You know that very well, right? So we have yet to be able to see what we think in a motive or to point to the resting place of jealousy or pride, because these are very difficult things to do. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So those were the characteristics of reality. Reality can seem very complex, right? Reality is very unique. Reality is very dynamic, and so forth. So let's now look at concepts, and these are the building blocks of our understanding. Now, in the remaining few minutes, I will take you through the nature of concepts, and I'll tell you that concepts are generalized abstractions. Concepts encompass diverse and what you may call universes of possibilities. Concepts are also hypothetical, ladies and gentlemen. And most concepts are learned, concepts are socially shared, concepts are reality-oriented or functional, concepts are selective constructions. So we now go into concepts, the building blocks of understanding. You know, we use concepts to understand reality and then be able to understand that reality very well. The nature of concepts. So let's begin by asking ourselves a question. How do individuals manage to make sense out of this world? How do individuals manage to construct reality out there? I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that they do so almost automatically and usually unconsciously by conceptualizing. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, in research, one of the most important steps that you should never lose is that step of conceptualizing. You need to conceptualize, you need to unpack, right? And here we are dealing with concepts. So people attempt to understand or make sense of what is around us automatically, consciously or unconsciously by concept, but in most cases unconsciously by conceptualizing. So when we say they unconsciously conceptualize, we mean that they use their mental processes to consider and sort their experiences in terms of the concepts they have acquired and stored in memory. From the time we were born, right, we're exposed through personal constructs, right? And I hope you have read the works of personal construct theory by Kelly, 1957, right? Personal constructs. Now, we develop concepts, right? But we have also been exposed to a number of concepts. I'll tell you a concept like bottle. I never constructed that, but from the time I was born, I found people calling something similar to this a bottle, right? So bottle is a concept. Other concept like a cup, for instance, right? That's a word that describes this cup, right? Then we can say pen. Pen is a concept. So individuals manage to make sense out of this world by automatically and unconsciously conceptualizing. So they use their mental processes to consider and sort their experiences in terms of the concepts they have acquired and stored in memory. So they will say this is a pen. So they will struggle through, right, in their minds to say this is a pen. So these individuals also develop new concepts to describe things that they had never previously experienced. So concepts, ladies and gentlemen, are the fundamental building blocks of everyday thinking. So as researchers, never ignore concepts. And in our next lecture, I'll be demonstrating to you how these things are developed, right? Anyway, when we reach that level, you'll understand, because I'm going to link this to our next lecture. So concepts are also fundamental building blocks of scientific thinking. So if you're talking about scientific thinking, then concepts will come in. So in research, we deal with concepts, ladies and gentlemen. Now, according to Webster Dictionary, the word concept refers to something that is conceived of in the mind. Concept is something that is conceived of in the mind. It is a generic idea or thought usually developed from experiencing one or more particular instances. So examples of concepts include shirt, right? I give an example of bottle, shirt, book, chair, mother, ice cream, advertising, smashed, etc., etc. Vacation, memory, love, prejudice, all these are concepts. As you can see, concepts refer to the things that are tangible and notable. For example, shirts, as well as do things that are not as concrete and directly seen, like memory. Memory is also a concept, but a shirt is also a concept. You can't see a shirt, you cannot see memory, right? So concepts refer to things that are tangible and notable, as well as to those things that are not as concrete and directly seen, to include things like memory and so forth, ladies and gentlemen. So we are still discussing the nature of concepts. So when experiencing the world about us, the world around us, we use concepts, right? We use those concepts we have in mind to identify and classify our experiences. That's why we say, this is a bottle of water. This is a cup of tea, right? And then we can also say, this is an ice cream. That is a shirt. Social scientists identify and classify people using concepts, right? Such as race. You know what has been happening in America around this time, right? Our brother Floyd, who was killed as a result of racism, right? But now you apply the word race, right? Because that is a concept that is used to refer to something, right? Gender, intelligence, attitude, all those are concepts. Now, because concepts are so central to our thinking as individuals, we examine their nature in somewhat greater detail. So we take time trying to examine, we take time trying to understand concepts. So concepts are generalized abstractions. When an individual has a concept, it means that he or she has a general idea that can be applied across a number of specific instances. For example, shirts differ in a great number of ways in terms of their fabric, in terms of their color, in terms of number of colors, sleeve length, the number of buttons, etc., the size and shape of the collar, whether there are pockets and the number of pockets, whether the shirt is squared off at the bottom or has tails, and so on and so on. We are dealing with the concepts, remember. So you can always use those concepts. So concepts are generalized abstractions, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why when we are doing research, we must conceptualize, right? We must conceptualize. We must understand what these concepts are. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are very important things. I do not want to really spend too much time on that. But let me also say concepts encompass universes of possibilities. And of course, an important feature of concepts, and of course, one that has fundamental implications for scientific theory and research, is that each concept consists of a universe of content. And we must always understand that. That's why we conceptualize, right? The concept shirt encompasses a universe of many specific possibilities. The concept ice cream, right? Ice cream encompasses a universe of possibilities. The concept attitude towards abortion or romantic love and so on, all encompass universe of possibilities. Ladies and gentlemen, hypotheses, right, are very important. As we develop hypotheses, we must also have these concepts used. But let me just say, before we reach that level, because I gave you an assignment and I hope you've done it, trying to distinguish, for instance, between propositions, right, hypotheses, and of course research questions, etc., etc. So, but we are still looking at concepts, the nature of concepts, right? Now, these concepts are hypothetical. Concepts are not reality. Concepts are just ideas regarding reality. For example, although the concept of a shirt exists in our minds, we do not walk around with the little shirts in our minds. I hope you understand what we are talking about. It's hypothetical. So in other words, you've got the concept of shirt in your mind, right? And that is an idea, the idea of a shirt, the idea of food, for instance, right? So you have it in your mind, but you will not walk around with food in your minds. You will not have food in your minds. You will not have a bottle. So it's a concept, it's an idea. But somewhere when you see it, you'll say, that is a bottle of water, but you will not move with a bottle of water in your mind so that everybody can see that bottle of water, ladies and gentlemen. So, concepts are not reality, just ideas regarding reality. And that's why we say concepts are abstract, right? And they do describe what we want to describe, ladies and gentlemen. So concepts are hypothetical, don't forget that. Although concepts are themselves hypothetical, the things to which they refer include both observable entities. For example, shirts, tables, they can be observed. Dogs, which form part of the external environment, and non-tangible phenomena such as love, happiness, and anger. So although we cannot see a person's hunger or anger directly, we can see the effects of this assumed state, and from these effects infer the existence of that particular aspect called anger or hunger in this place. So that is very important. Now the other things for you to note is that most concepts are learned, they are acquired creations. The infant does not come into the world already possessing the concept shirt. No, he simply picks up these things with the time, and he's always taught cat, dog. And I think that's the first thing you do when you are teaching young ones, right? So most of these things are learned, the concepts are learned, and I think I will not really go into details of that. Concepts are also socially shared, right? So there's a social aspect related to concepts. For instance, a particular society and a community may have a terminology referring to something, and when you go to another society, that particular concept may be referring to something totally different, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why, in order for communication to occur, the set of concepts possessed by one individual generally needs to be similar to the sets possessed by others. Others will be discussing a different thing altogether, right? So the meeting of the mind may not be there. So, for example, let's consider a researcher trying to discuss fact analysis with a non-researcher who has never heard of the subject of fact analysis. So somebody will say fact analysis, and because he's a researcher, he understands the concept very well. He will know what fact analysis means. So the conceptualization becomes a little bit easy. Now the other fellow who has never heard of it, he starts now imagining. Maybe he has heard the word factor. He has also heard the word analysis. And that's why the fellow may even begin by saying, but you know factor means this. You know also analysis means this. So when you combine the two, fact analysis becomes, but when in the actual sense fact analysis means something that is totally different. Confirmatory fact analysis, the same thing. So that's why we are saying that these concepts are socially shared. So if you are a member of the scientific research community, you understand these things. But when you go to the policymakers, for instance, you may not use the same words, right? Because you are in a different setting altogether. And that's why as researchers, we are supposed to write papers, right? And that is now a document that is meant to help policymakers make sense of what your findings are and come up with what we call evidence-based policies, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are some of the things that led to concepts. I know there are many others, but I'll ask you to go and read. For example, you know, concepts are reality-oriented, right? So they are functional, they mirror, right? What we see out there, right? etc., etc., right? We also know that concepts are selective constructions. Selective constructions. So please, in your free time, look at those things and read them. And I hope you'll be able to understand that aspect of selective construction, because the world we experience can be conceptualized in almost countless ways. For example, looking at the woman's white blouse, we can think of it as something that provides a socially expected degree of modesty. Another one might say, well, this is something that offers protection from the wind and the sun. Another one will say, no, it's something that is decorative. Another one might say, it's something that can be used to wash a car, or something that can be used as bondage or tunic. So another one will say, well, it's a white flag to indicate surrender. So I think you can see concepts as selective constructions, and we need to understand that. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, as we move towards the end, let me now relate these two things: concepts, constructs, and variables. I've already told you what concepts are, right? How about constructs and variables? Ladies and gentlemen, as might be imagined, the adult individual's mind or minds contains a larger number of concepts. Fortunately, most concepts cluster together under broader, more encompassing concepts. For example, shirts and ties are both examples of clothing. Cats and dogs are both examples of mammals, which along with snakes and insects are examples of animals. Now, such higher order concepts are referred to as constructs. I hope you are following. We start with the concepts. I told you concepts are abstract, right? These are words that we use to describe reality. I gave you an example of cup. Cup is a concept. It's abstract, right? And these are things that reside in our heads. Whenever we see something, we invoke and say, that is it, right? Cup, right? Bottle, that's what it is. But I'm saying here that some concepts cluster together under broader, more encompassing concepts. And a very good example is that of a shirt and a tie. So if you bring together shirts and ties, the examples of clothing, clothing is a more encompassing concept. And that more encompassing concept is a construct. But a tie is a concept, right? And the shirt is a concept. Another example that I've just given you is a cat. Cat is a mammal. Dog is a mammal. And these are examples. But when you bring them together, cats and dogs, right, and other mammals, they form that construct called mammal. So the word mammal, along with snakes, insects, and so forth, which are examples of animals, can be considered as constructs. So mammal is a construct, and animal is a construct. So such higher order concepts are called constructs because they refer to instances that are constructed from concepts at lower levels of abstraction. That's what it is, right? These ones, the constructs, refer to instances that are constructed from concepts at lower levels of abstraction, ladies and gentlemen. We therefore form and use constructs because they are a powerful means by which we are able to handle greater portions of reality. I mean, if you're going to mention every insect, right, say this is using those concepts, I mean, the world will be quite difficult to describe and understand. For you to start talking about shirt, and you're going to bring about the different types of shirts, right, describe the characteristics, and then you, after that, you pick the ties, you do the same thing. No, you can't talk about clothing. The word clothing is encompassing. So within clothing, you have so many other concepts within it. Therefore, it's very, very important at this stage for people to understand what concepts are and what constructs are, right? So not only do we use constructs because of their greater economy, ladies and gentlemen, or efficiency and power, but also because they enable us to achieve a certain degree of order when we are dealing with the almost infinite number of separate concepts that postulates our minds. And therefore, constructs are very important for us. So we now understand what concepts are, ladies and gentlemen. We also understand what constructs are. I want to take you now to another level of variables, right? So what are variables? Now, ladies and gentlemen, one type of construct that is used in many scientific theories is called a variable. And a variable has or is composed of different levels of values. For example, gender can be conceptualized as a variable that has two levels or values. That is, it can be seen as being composed of two concepts or categories, male and female. I think now you see what we are talking about, right? We are talking about a concept and then a construct and a variable. The moment you are able to assign values and something can take on differing values, then you are talking about a variable. A variable is anything that can take on differing values. A variable has or is composed of different levels of values, right? Gender, as I said, which is a concept, right? But in this case, gender can have male, female, and other things, actually a construct, right? But it can take on two levels or values, right? And therefore, you can actually look at it in terms of male and female and so forth. So religion, for instance, is a variable consisting of the conceptually distinct categories: Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, on and so on and so on, right? You also have the evangelicals. Time is a variable that can be conceptualized as something consisting two categories, right? You can talk about 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and so on up to infinity, ladies and gentlemen. Right, so why don't we then briefly, in a second, as I summarize, look at conceptual systems, which is the basis for deeper understanding. And since we are researchers, ladies and gentlemen, by enabling us to identify, describe, differentiate, classify, and segregate our experiences, concepts assist us in achieving some rudimentary understanding of reality. Yet, when used in isolation, concepts and variables typically provide a limited degree of understanding. So what do we do then? We develop conceptual systems. So it is only when concepts are placed into relationship with each other that they move us towards achieving a deeper understanding of reality. Those interactions are always out there. So consider the concept like convict, chair, smashed, hungry, etc. They are concepts, but they are meaningless Unless we place them in a conceptual system, right, and we start relating these things one to another, then we get a conceptual system. And in research, we deal with the conceptual system. Ladies and gentlemen, since this was a recap of some of the things that we have already covered, I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to lecture to you, and for providing the undivided attention throughout the last few minutes. I want to thank you for attending, and I can only say stay well and stay safe, and I wish you a nice time. And in our next lecture, I will attempt to link this concept of construction of reality to the lecture that we've just had now. So stay tuned. In our next lecture, I'll be talking about the construction of reality, and I will introduce you to a number of philosophers who have taken us into this area. And you need to understand what's happening and what scholars have developed for you to be able to undertake research that has meaning. I wish you a nice time. Bye.